Welcome to Represent NYC on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. My name is Victoria Bert. I'm the producer of this show. And joining me now is Assemblymember Niou, who represents the 65th District in Manhattan, and that includes Chinatown, the Financial District, Lower East Side, and Battery Park City. Hi, Yulin, how are you?
Good to see your face, your beautiful face.
Oh, it's your beautiful face. So, your district was really affected by COVID-19 before it really presented in the city. There were people who weren't going down to Chinatown as much and down to the lower part of the city. What's the effect you've seen? How do you think it's going to come back to life, if at all?
Yeah, so, as people have probably heard from me on, there has been a lot less runway for a lot of the businesses in Chinatown just due to the fact that racism has had really impacted starting January, February, the foot traffic going into Chinatown. And so even before restaurants were shut down, even before a lot of the small businesses were forced to shut down by the government, there was an impact on sales. And I think that it's going to be a little bit harder for Chinatown and the Lower East Side to ramp back up again. I think that, a lot of our small businesses are very small businesses. And I think that those businesses are going to have a harder time kind of figuring out new models to work. And I think that that's something that is going to be something that impacts so many of us. And I think we're going to have a little bit of a difficulty kind of overcoming some of the stereotypes and the racism that's been kind of permeating throughout, to get folks back to being able to shop in Chinatown. And I think that a lot of people anticipate that. A lot of people are very frightened, not just due to the virus itself, but also due to the racism that has been permeating. We've been seeing a lot more violence. I mean, the second day that, certain stores were open, there was already brawls and outright brawls and, and racist acts. And so, I think that there's been instances where, we need to really kind of educate folks on what is actually going on, which is a distraction. I think racism is a distraction from actually getting things to the communities and really fighting for the resources that we deserve as we know, especially our minority communities have been suffering the most from the outbreak of the virus. And I think it's been because, people of color are essential workers, food delivery workers, nurses, doctors, frontline folks who are cleaning buildings and cleaning the hospitals, and, are also the folks who are delivering meals and making sure that people are getting the help that they need. And so I think that it's really important that folks recognize, why the statistics are the way that they are, and what's actually going on, and that our communities have been hurt. And I think that, it's also really important to say that, we have a heartbeat where we're also working on trying to help our own neighbors out, right? So there are some amazing mutual aid networks that are springing up. There's also, within some of the small businesses, so many of our small businesses in Chinatown are actually the ones providing food for essential workers, making sure that, our seniors are fed, folks who are homeless are fed. I want to give a special shout out to 46 Mott, which is literally, feeding over, sometimes 600 people a day. So we have a lunch line that's about 180 to 200 people every day. And then we have a nighttime shift that we go and send food out to the night shift essential workers at Beth Israel. And then we also go and make sure that there's folks who are fed in all throughout the district, because, I think that there's a larger and larger food scarcity problem that's happening all throughout New York, and people are seeing it. And having a hot, nutritious meal is really, really important, because we've been seeing what's been going on the DIFTA level of food. And for seniors who may have diabetes or need a low sodium diet, it's really, really difficult if you are getting cereal and milk and um, like crackers or cookies in your box instead of something that's hot and nutritious. So
The small businesses down there, are they getting connected to the money for the PPP loans? Are they getting those loans? Hearing that?
No. So, all of our small businesses have been trying to apply. In the second round, like one or two people that are larger have gotten the PPP, but I have not, like, I've checked in on so many restaurants and so many small businesses in Chinatown, and basically not a single one has gotten help. And, there was like one or two folks in the second round that started to get like a little bit of help, but it's still like not adequate. And then in the third round, we're hearing that there's been some different responses, but I mean, the smallest restaurants fall through. I hate to say like the cracks because it's actually by design, so it's not really crack. It's like it's a purposeful gap that was designed to leave certain communities out and certain businesses out.
What about the Nitra housing in your district? Are you seeing any sort of like change with the workers getting personal protective equipment and being able to do repairs, and what's happening in the Nitra housing?
Yeah, so I mean, in our NYC developments, I mean, we've seen that there has been I would say, abysmal cleaning schedule. I don't think that the cleaning schedule has been as good as it should have been, obviously. And, we've written letters, we've talked to a lot of folks about, making sure that there's particular kinds of cleaning and cleaning schedules, and then the folks doing the cleaning, like we've been seeing that folks were not getting the proper PPEs, and like also not even having gloves when having to wipe up things and things like that. So we like talked to NYCHA about it and tried to make sure that they're getting the right things. And of course, like my office has been making sure that we get supplies and things to the union workers who are actually being asked to do certain things. And we've also noticed that it's different people. I think that there's been a lot of deaths and a lot of illnesses that have been, or a lot of illness, I guess. You know what illness it is, but a lot of illness that has been prevalent in folks that have had to be at the front lines, right? So like I think that that's really been one of the biggest things that we've been pushing, which is to make sure that NYCHA cleaning schedule is more frequent, because it wasn't like not very frequent, and then making sure that workers are protected when they're cleaning, and it's woefully inadequate.
The state budget that was passed in April, you had a lot to say about it. You had a lot to say about it. Talk to me about what some of your chief complaints were.
I mean, I just think that it's been very apparent that our state has been cutting resources when we've needed them the most, and I think that that is a mistake. I think that we really need to be investing and making sure that we are investing in infrastructure and building up strength while we are in the midst of this crisis. Like I think that we need to help to build the steps towards recovery, because we're not going to be able to cut our way to recovery. We're not going to be able to cut our way to healing. We're not going to be able to cut our way to safety. What we need to do is we have to actually build the infrastructure for healing, for safety, and for recovery. We should be investing in our schools while children are not able to go to school. Like there needs to be some kind of way of being able to make up for some of the things that students are not going to get because they're not physically in classes, and I think that there's a lot of things that are missing, and like there's a lot of kids that are left out, and I think that we need to do a better job of that. I think that we should not be cutting healthcare in the midst of
Medicaid, right? They cut
in
Medicaid.
the midst of a global pandemic. We should not be cutting Medicaid. We should not be cutting our community health centers when people are having a really difficult time with language access, knowing what the services are, knowing what their, what their rights are in this time. And like, I think like it's really important that like folks are actually, knowing what's going on for their family members. And I think that it's a really difficult time, like when you think about like what they're cutting and what people need, right? It's like almost direct, but like what happens in the state budget is that, people look at the biggest pots and then cut from them. And of course, our biggest pots are healthcare and education. And so, I think that it's like an easy cut instead of like actually going and looking through things that, could be considered, non-essential. And then there's also things that, we have been proposing to raise revenue, right? And I think that there's a lot of easy ways for us to raise revenue
Like
from
what?
folks who can pay it. An ultramillionaires tax, which like our assembly has passed in the past, I think have been a really good measure of like what could be a possibility, right? Because that will raise us a certain amount of revenue in order to kind of make ends meet, I guess, on the state level. There's also, I have a stock buyback transfer tax. There's also a stock transfer tax that Bill Stegg is sponsoring. There's also the pied-à-terre tax. There's also like different kinds of things that we can do to raise revenue, right? There's bonding that we could be doing to raise revenue. There's a lot of different ways that we can raise revenue. It's either taxing or borrowing, right? Like there are two different ways that we can raise revenue on the state level. I know on the federal level, they can print money and they can do certain things, but on the state level, there's still ways that we can raise money. And like, I think that, instead of hurting people when they literally have nothing more to give, like, I think that we should be looking at making sure that we are pulling revenue from the sources that are least impacted.
Something else that you talked about are the e-bikes. Tell me why that's something that you're sort of like fighting for.
Not sort of, I am. Like, I think that e-bikes are so important, and we finally were able to take off some of these fees and fines. And I think like really what's been going on has been really crazy, which is that, folks have been fined like $500 just for having an e-bike, etc. And these are delivery folks who depend on their bike for a living, right? And our frontline essential workers, a lot of like folks don't realize, like, they're the reason why you can stay at home, right? And I think that some folks are just underappreciated. But $500 per ticket is more than when you run a red light in a car, right? Like, I think like this is like just having an e-bike, like how is that like the fine for, and if you think about it, when somebody is working as a delivery worker, you're working off of a very, very small salary and like a very, very small amount of tips. And so folks are lucky if they make $300 a day, like, and then if you get a fine, it's $500. So you're at a loss. And then some people get multiple tickets a day. And then some people get their bikes taken away. And, those bikes are not cheap. So it's like, that's their living right there. And I think that it makes it so that it's really difficult for delivery workers to keep working. And I understand like that there's like, concerns about, safety, et cetera, of like riding at a certain speed. So, limit the speed and then make it so that it's possible. But, that was not part of the city's discussion. And it was just like fines and then taking of a confiscation of bikes. And it was particularly, targeted, I think, towards particular communities. And other people could ride their e-bikes without any problem, but delivery workers for minority communities were particularly targeted for these fines. And I felt like that was really unfair. And it was very ironic because on the one hand, there was like the fines and fees and surcharges that were like put onto delivery workers and e-bike riders that were delivery workers, and yet on the other hand, they had these city bike e-bikes that they were just like promoting the heck out of, and I just thought it was just like, wow, isn't that hypocritical? And like there was only like 3 miles or 4 miles per hour difference between the two bikes, and it's like, what? Like I couldn't understand it. I couldn't believe it. And I felt like it was very blatantly ignoring the needs of a community. So,
And very focused.
and very focused.
Very focused. So talk to me just in the last few minutes about what sort of the top 3 things you're hearing from your constituents, and how, if somebody's having a problem, they can reach you.
Sure.
I know you're not in your office, but I know you're available. So
yeah, I'm very. So I try to encourage folks to email or to you can DM me on my Twitter, but you can also call. I think it's just my office is still taking calls. We have 6 lines that are open right now to folks. It goes directly from our phones to their cell phones, to my staff cell phones. And so they've been picking up and making sure that we are helping folks, sign up for unemployment, signing up for benefits, and making sure that, they are able to let us know if there's any food insecurity for them, or if there's anything that they need, whether it's PPEs or help with just getting some direction on which areas to apply for their small business, etc. And I think my staff has fielded. I just want to put this out there, because like my staff has fielded almost 900 unemployment insurance calls, and that's like, I get that that's high, but that just means that there's nothing to be embarrassed about when filing for unemployment. I want that out there, because I want people to understand that this is a crisis, and folks have, by government requiring them to shut down, like have had to lay off people, or like have people who are on unemployment, and I think that it's, especially in like our communities like ours, there's people who are just very afraid of applying, or just like ashamed of applying. And I think that, folks have to realize that there's no shame right now about like making sure that like, you get the help that you need to make sure that your families are safe, and that your communities are safe, and that you're able to be safe, right? And I think that it's not about like, oh, hey, you don't have a job right now. Like it's not something that's shameful. We've helped so many folks, and these are folks who we see every day, so I just want you to know, like, I want everybody who's listening to know that there's nothing shameful about having to apply for unemployment insurance, and there's nothing shameful at all about having to get some benefits, or to ask for food help, or to ask for help in any way, because right now everybody's struggling.
Assemblymember Niou, thank you so much. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.